What's up, everybody? Peter Exodus O'Coffer here, and welcome to another episode of Nothing But the Funk. Yeah, baby, we dropping that funk today. I am doing this episode on funk, the funk, and the guitar. For some reason, people do not give funk guitar a lot of love. I mean, uh, they talk, now the Rolling Stone does give some love, when they, to some of these folks when they do, in their latest, list of 250, guitarists of all time. But funk has historically been overlooked, when it comes to great guitar play. And, funk is a very broad category too. I mean, for most of you, listening, I'm probably familiar with the early Funkadelic, you know, catalog, from, Hardcore Jollies and back. And I mean, that was rock meets funk. I mean, Funkadelic, psychedelic, and it was heavily guitar driven. And, and Hendrix had some funk to him. I mean, but we'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, we need to give these funk guitarists their flowers and dive in and discuss funk and the guitar. So, what's the one of the differences usually, leaving the early Funkadelic vibe is, rock uses distortion and funk usually has a cleaner sound. Now, the exception is the wah-wah pedal. And, I mean, but, Funkadelic was using, distortion, he will use distortion as well. And you can, but that's the main distinction, and also you have to be a much technique wise, with the funk sound being clean. I mean, if you make a mistake, everybody's gonna hear the mistake because it's a clean sound. There's no distortion to hide it. It can be a little sloppier, if you're a rock guitarist. The history, I mean, funk goes back to the very core of guitar playing. Charlie Christian, jazz guitarist, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was the first guitarist outside the blues. He broke the ceiling, so to speak. Charlie Christian, black man. Then he didn't. I don't even think he lived, to be 40. He died young. I think he caught on with Benny Goodman, because you remember now, I mean, let's put this in proper historical perspective. I mean, before Elvis, jazz was king. I mean, before rock and roll, jazz was the dominant commercial music form. And, Frank Sinatra, was a lounge. He was a jazz singer. And he was he was the dude before Elvis came along. And then, you had, Cab Calloway and all those folks as well. But but Charlie Christian broke that ceiling. Nobody, they didn't, jazz musicians did not take the guitar seriously. But I think it was Benny Goodman, one of the great swing bands of the era, was impressed with Charlie Christian, brought him on, and then, guitarists followed after that. But what Charlie created and why he could, break that was the basic guitar tone that's still used in funk today. I mean, you listen to jazz guitar, they're not using distortion. It's a very, very clean sound. It's the same tone and sound that you hear in the chicken scratch playing of funksters. So Charlie Christian created that. Wes Montgomery, out of here in Indianapolis, took that tone and really did some great things, technique wise with his playing, which leads into funk. Now, Wes Montgomery is a great, is widely considered the greatest jazz guitarist of all time. Again, the same clean sound that Charlie Christian, created, and then funk guitars use it. Les Paul was another very good jazz guitarist. Les is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but Les is in because everybody loves his, Les was a very good marketer, and he, a very good guitarist, but, you can still buy a Les Paul today. I mean, that's the top of the line Gibson guitar. And so he got in there because of his work with Gibson, or at least, but he should be in there for his guitar playing. Les is a very good guitarist. But, so where does the chicken scratch, Jimmy Nolen is credited with, from James Brown, in the late 65, 66, 67 for creating it. Now, Jimi Hendrix, he did the same chicken scratch. If you listen to, lost my train. So Jimi Hendrix, 1968, 69, New Year's Eve. He uses the chicken scratch guitar, and Machine Gun on the Band of Gypsies album. This is live. Jimmy did his best playing live on the guitar, just like Prince did. So yes, Jimmy, but Jimmy Nolen did it first. Now, since had great, Jimmy's probably has jazz roots. I should have researched that, but he probably has jazz roots, and in many ways, even though Jimmy came up, through the Chitlin circuit. He played a lot, in R&B bands. He played for Little Richard briefly. And the crowd, there's a story with Jimi Hendrix is the crowd was going crazy, and Little Richard thought they were going crazy for him, and he turned around and he saw Hendrix playing the guitar with his teeth, and, well, let's just say Jimmy didn't have a job much longer. He don't upstage Little Richard. Jimmy played briefly with the Isley brothers. So he played mostly in that old R&B before the funk, some bands and that, like that. But so, Jimmy, Jimmy Nolen was the first, though. You want to hear some great, great, great funk guitar. Phelps, Catfish Collins, Bootsy's brother, has passed, rest in peace, Catfish. James Brown, Catfish and Bootsy were only with James for about a year and a half. But a lot got accomplished when they were with James. Sex Machine they recorded, and one of their final recordings, or I think the seminal recording that they did with James was Superbad, because I think Superbad is when, James, in 65 drops Papa Got a Brand New Bag, and I think 1970 or 71 is when Superbad, came out. But that's when James left the lab, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is, we're not experimenting anymore, and obviously Sex Machine and a lot of these other songs were, even though James was an experimental mode, they're great songs, but there was a different confidence and a different feel with Superbad, and it's kind of like, okay, yep, we test drove it, we've done the engineering, we're ready to hit the road and take on all comers. And that was kind of Superbad, and Catfish and Bootsy were in the studio for that. But Love, Power, and Peace is a James Brown live album that was recorded in 1971. It was not released until the mid-90s. But if you want to hear some funk guitar, listen to that bad boy, because Catfish is on fire. And funk guitar is characterized, as rhythm guitar, and is usually in the background, and you know. But rarely does funk, it's not as flashy as rock guitar, except this concert. I mean, Catfish will have your jaw on the ground with some of this stuff. He gets Hendrix very almost like Jimi Hendrix in some ways, but through the lens of funk guitar in this concert. So check that out. It's on all the streaming services. Love, Peace, and Power. Yeah, let me pull this up so I can tell you exactly where to go to on Love, Peace, and Power. I think it's, James's best live, official live stuff ever released. And James has released some very, very good live stuff. But it's, it is that good. And, Bootsy and Catfish really had, they were brothers. And Catfish was the older brother. But, when brothers play together, there's a special bond that is formed. All right, so I pulled up Love, Peace, and Power, James Brown, live at the Olympia, Paris, 1971. Okay. There's the intro. Then he goes into brother rap and Ain't It Funky Now. Definitely, that's where, Catfish starts doing his sorcery. And then the end of the Give It Up and Turn It Loose. That's in the middle of the concert. Again, Catfish starts doing some otherworldly shit there. And then at the end, Get Up and Get Involved, Soul Power, and then they segue back in to Get Up and Get Involved. And again, that's some straight Catfish sorcery there. So check that out. Who are some of the great funk guitarist? Curtis Mayfield, comes to mind. And Curtis rarely did the chicken scratch, but Curtis was, could really play with emotion with the guitar. He was a funky dude. He had that falsetto, that really light, falsetto, that he used so effectively, but knew when to hit it harder, vocally. Love Curtis Mayfield, and of course he had a political side to his music too, and he picked his spots too when he would get into genius mode with the guitar. Ernie Isley with the Isley Brothers. Ernie Isley is very underrated. He should definitely be on the he's not in the Rolling Stone top 250. Rolling Stone did the top 100 guitarists in 2003, and they did the top 250 last year in 2023. Ernie Isley should be somewhere on that list. Everybody's fighting over the list because lists like that. But on the 2023 list is going back for a minute. Jimmy Nolen clocks in at number 12. So funk guitarist is getting some love. And Jimmy, essentially invented the chicken scratch. And, so he clocks in at 12. So Ernie Isley, amazing guitarist. Curtis Mayfield, Prince. I have a whole episode of Prince and the guitar on the Purple Manifesto podcast. Nile Rodgers came along later, but Nile Rodgers was a great funk guitarist. And then one of the unsung heroes of funk guitar, Charles Skip Pitts. And he was Isaac Hayes' guitarist. And all I'm going to say is go to Isaac's Go to some of his, extended versions of some of his songs where he handed the ball off to Skip Pitts and let him play. Skip Pitts was a master of the wah-wah pedal. So, Hung Up on My Baby, I mean, he basically, that's, and remember, Isaac was a good keyboardist, so it's probably Isaac on keyboards, but, that was, Isaac wisely, handed that over to Skip Pitts and, to let him shine. And that sample's used in My Mind Is Playing Tricks on Me by the Ghetto Boys, and that's what it's famous for. But, that riff, that's Skip Pitts, and I'm pretty sure Skip probably got a writing credit for that. That's great rhythm guitar, but he's doing more than rhythm guitar and Hung Up on My Baby. The theme from Shaft, again, that chicken scratch guitar that Jimmy Nolen created. Skip Pitts does it, but he adds the wah-wah pedal to it. And then Walk On By and Do Your Thing. Man, was that, Skip, those are both about 10 to 12 minutes long because, Isaac Hayes let Skip Pitts shine, and that's some good guitar playing there. Skip Pitts, nobody knows who he is. He should be in that 250 list. It's interesting, rock guitarist counterpart to kind of Skip Pitts is Steve Stevens, who is Billy Idol's guitarist and collaborator over many years, and it kind of sucks to be a long-time guitarist with a solo act, because a lot of folks, for whatever reason, don't get to know your name. If they were bands, you would know these guys. But, Steve Stevens and Charles Skip Pitts are two unsung heroes when it comes to guitar. Now, I know fellow guitarists, particularly Steve Stevens, know who Steve Stevens is. Even professional ones know he's a bad man. But Skip Pitts is a bad man. So, has passed on. I'm sure. Out of Memphis, because that's where Stax and Isaac was, but check out some Skip Pitts. That dude was, he was a masterful, and then he was there with, using a wah-wah pedal and funk, but there was a lot of Eric Clapton and David Gilmour, Pink Floyd, and Skip Pitts is playing, and then he was able to evoke the same type of emotions that. Particularly that both Eric Clapton and David Gilmour, Pink Floyd, were able to do. So he's in that sort of vein. He's not as much of a Hendrix or, say, a Eddie Van Halen player, but in that other side of the spectrum, so to speak. But Skip Pitts is that dude. Then we can't talk about great funk guitarists without talking about Jesse Johnson of the time. I mean, Jesse was a very good funk guitarist. I mean, Chocolate off of the Pandemonium album, but yeah, man. And then that his solo in the Second Time album. What did he do? Prince did the solo and Get It Up on the First Time album. 7/7/93/11. That was off the What Time Is It album for Jesse Johnson at the time, and Jesse just kills that. He takes that solo with relish and kills it. So Jesse Johnson is Jesse should probably be in that 250 list as well. I mean, look, people don't give funk guitarists the love they deserve, but that's why I'm doing this episode. Finally, last but not least, we need to talk about Parliament Funkadelic and the P-Funk guitar tree. Everybody in the rock world talks about the Yardbirds. You had Jeff Beck, and then you had Clapton, and then you had Jimmy Page, and then Beck leaves, Clapton goes solo, and Jimmy Page starts, recruiting people for new Yardbirds, but then, that the Yardbirds morph into Led Zeppelin. So, I mean, that is Led Zeppelin, when it comes to rock guitar, I mean, that is the holy grail of the lineage. P-Funk is the holy grail when it comes to the funk, and, I think it's right there, honestly, with Led Zeppelin. I mean, great guitar is great guitar. So it starts with Eddie Hazel, and Eddie Hazel, did Maggot Brain. Eddie passed in the late 70s, but I mean, Maggot Brain is one of the great, guitar-based songs of all time, instrumental, and it's just Eddie shredding the hell. I mean, it's Hendrix and very Hendrix, and Eddie just being Eddie. So, Rolling Stone ranked Eddie Hazel at number 83 out of 100 in 2003, and they bumped him up to 29 in 2023. A lot of respect being paid there. P-Funk guitarist Michael Kid Funkadelic Hampton. He joins, when Eddie leaves. I mean, part of Eddie Hazel, drugs and whatnot. So he comes in at 17, I believe, in 72 or 73. And, Michael Hampton is like, that dude's amazing. He's fire. So yeah, I mean, and then by the 90s, for whatever reason, Michael sometimes, they bring in Dwayne Blackbird McKnight. And I don't know if Blackbird comes in the late 80s or early 90s, but, Blackbird is bad too. Like that, Michael Hampton and Blackbird are just vicious when it comes to guitar. And I don't know if I assume, because, P-Funk is almost always touring. I assume they may have, played together, because P-Funk always brings 3 to 5 guitarists, they always, on the road. So I assume that, Blackbird and Kid Funkadelic played together live. Dwayne Blackbird McKnight also played with Herbie Hancock on the Great Headhunters album, that classic jazz album. He was on that album. He's also played with Miles Davis, and I guess Blackbird, filled in, for the Red Hot Chili Peppers at some point. They've gone through guitarists sometimes. Chili Peppers, another band, thinking about it, have had some pretty good guitarists, but it cycled through a couple of them. But yeah, so if you're not a P-Funketeer, you probably don't know who Michael Kid Funkadelic Hampton is, or Dwayne Blackbird McKnight, but those dudes are bad. I just, all you gotta do, go find some live P-Funk and on YouTube and check it out. But also, Gary Scheider was the musical director, for P-Funk. So, I mean, George was the dude. Obviously, Gary Scheider had, knew probably music theory. He probably did the arrangements for, in some ways, even though George was kind of the director in some ways. And, but, George is amazing considering he doesn't, understand music theory. No, I don't understand music theory. Okay, a little bit. George doesn't even play an instrument, but George was just, would walk through and they would all be in the studio and be like, all right, I like what you're doing, and I like what you're doing, I like over there what you're doing, get together and figure that out. I mean, George had a great ear. But, Gary Scheider was the music director, and probably, I mean, he didn't do the lead stuff, was a great, I'm sure, rhythm guitarist, because there's plenty of funk rhythm guitar to be played with P-Funk. But of course, we know Gary Scheider as the Diaper Man. And then Glenn Goins also played guitar, and Glenn Goins was, he also could sing his ass off, to quote Miles Davis. The P-Funk Earth Tour, doing the gospel, and the Mother the Mothership Connection, that's Glenn Golan. So, yeah. So P-Funk, they brought it when it came to guitar playing. So yeah, we got to give the funk guitar players some love and their chance to sign. So yeah, we did that this episode. So let me hit this close. So thank you for coming through. Appreciate your support. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave some comments. Got 5 albums of my own. They're attached here to my channel, and also on all the streaming services under the name Exodus, Xodus. Again, 5 albums. My first album is called Book 1. And I also have 2 science fiction fantasy novels and a novella on Amazon under the name Peter Exodus O'Coffer. So thank you again for coming through, and I will see you next episode.